Hello, my name is Ruth Manis. I'm the executive director of MoCA Westport. Many, many months ago, I really reached out to Victoria McCraven. Victoria is a curator that I had contact with at Next Haven, and she is now getting her PhD at Princeton. She's an amazing scholar, an amazing sort of new eye, fresh eye in the art world. I was so grateful that Victoria wanted to take on this project. Victoria came, we met, we sort of talked about MoCA and what she could do in this space. And we were so grateful that she was able to put It Will Go On together for us. The inclusion of Asmaa Walton as the founder of the Black Mobile Art Library out of Detroit was amazing as well. And I will let them sort of talk about their connection. They both were fellows in St. Louis at the Romare Bearden Fellowship. So we are just thrilled and grateful to have both of them here in the space participating. Again, it's so unbelievable, this experience, and really an amazing group of artists from all over the country are participating in this. And we're really honored and thrilled to have Asmaa and Victoria participate in this exhibition. So we're excited to have this conversation. Asmaa is in Detroit. Victoria is in New Jersey. I'm in Connecticut. And hopefully we'll reach all of you out there. And thank you so much for attending.
Thank you so much, Ruth, for that introduction. And I'm just so pleased to be able to have this conversation today. And thank you to everyone at MoCA Westport for helping to make It Will Go On a possibility. And Black Art Library, which Asmaa founded, is a really wonderful part of that exhibition. And so we're really looking forward to discussing how Black Art Library was founded and its impact in the current landscape of arts and culture. So It Will Go On was inspired a lot by a poem by Nikki Giovanni called My Poem, which was written in 1968, in which Giovanni is talking about censorship and the different forms of quieting that are happening in the 60s and using poetry as a way of thinking about revolution. And the final line of the poem is It Will Go On, which is from where the exhibition gets its title. And so I wanted to think about how forms of resistance continue to go on within the context of contemporary art, and thinking with artists around how the poetics and how text as a central form of making can be used to express so many different narratives and forms of resistance that are going on here in our everyday lives. On the left is an installation image showing the title of the exhibition. There are 13 artists included in the show, so I'm going to talk about a little bit about some of the artists that are in the show and their work. So at the right is a work by Camila Janan Rashid. She's a Brooklyn-based artist who has a 10-minute installation of a video work that is thinking about text and really asking difficult questions around linearity and Black knowledge production. Here we have the first gallery. So when you first enter the exhibition, at the left is a work by Demian Diniache. It's an installation work that is really urging viewers to detach themselves from colonial imaginaries. We have two prints by Susan Chen, this print by Glenn Ligon, and then the two prints by Tavares Strawn. We also have a painting and a sculpture by Neha Shrestha. And many of these works are thinking about ideas of belonging and ideas of protest, but also abolition is a theme that's running through the exhibition, and how text is really a central mode in doing that. So then we see two works at the end here. On the left image is a work by John Rivas, and then a work by William Ransom. And Ransom and Rivas are thinking with multiple number of mediums, thinking of painting and sculpture, And really, again, using text as a form of resistance. And on the image on the right is works by Helena Metaferia, Zyveria Simmons, and Vanessa Charlotte. And then we have two more installation images from the second gallery. The sculptural work is by Khalil Irving. And then in the back, the neon work by Demian, and then also another work by William Ransom. So many of these works are also thinking about police violence. And in conversation, I think it's a reminder of so much of what's happened recently, with many of the works being from 2020, but also it's showing the ways in which you can use text as a way of bringing together people, bringing together new narratives, but also as a charge to visitors to think about their own revolutionary ways of making, of writing, of speaking. And then on the right, one more work here also by Remy Sosa. And so in thinking about this exhibition and the theme of textual resistance and this call that the revolution will go on, I felt it was also really important to include a space of contemplation and a space of pedagogy in the exhibition. It was so wonderful to collaborate with Asmaa in creating this iteration of Black Art Library, in which you're able to continue these many questions of revolution and to also sit with the work and read more about the artists that are in the show. This was just a really wonderful way to continue that form of revolution and thinking about how libraries can also be revolutionary spaces. And so I'm so pleased to have Asmaa here today to talk more about how she founded Black Art Library, its place and its incredible growth. And as Ruth was saying, Asmaa and I were both Bearden Fellows at the St. Louis Art Museum. And that's where I first found out about Black Art Library. It was something that Asmaa was working on, and it was taking off. And she was the fellow just before me. So they have an amazing process there at the St. Louis Art Museum where the previous fellow trained the incoming fellow. So in many ways, Asmaa helped to usher me into the world of museum work. So wonderful to be in conversation with her today.
Thanks so much for having me be a part of this installation at MoCA Westport. I was just really excited to be able to work with you, Victoria, on this project after the connection that we had in St. Louis. And we also, not too long ago, we were just on a panel together, and you were moderating. It went great. So I was really happy to be brought along on this journey. So Black Art Library was a project that I started in 2020 while I was at the St. Louis Art Museum. It wasn't a part of the fellowship. It was just something that I was doing like when I wasn't there, like on the side, something that I had got an idea about, and I was like, maybe this is something I could do. So I started the project in 2020 with the goal of just building a educational resource that is based on Black visual art. And I thought art books could be a really cool way to do that. In my mind, art books are the second best way to see a work if you can't see it in person. I would put screens like third behind that. The art books, they put so much work and money and time into them, which is why they're so expensive. But you get really, really beautiful images and the photos look amazing. Seeing it on a screen, it's nice, but it's not the same. So I was like, well, okay, this could be a way I could do this. Let me just start collecting these books and we'll kind of see what happens. I didn't really have an idea for where it was going to go. I was just like, I don't know where it's going. Let me just start it and I'll kind of figure that out as I go. And then a month later, the world shut down and I was, in St. Louis, but on lockdown. St. Louis Art Museum was closed until June. So we were closed for about 3 months. So during that time, I was working from home. So it also gave me more time to work on this project, to continue to buy books and grow the collection, but also gave me a chance to really start connecting with the Instagram like account that I had made for it. So during that time, people were, you know, seeking out ways to connect with other people. Everyone was so isolated. The internet was a way to do that. So there were so many things that we saw kind of born on the internet during that time. And I got so many people kind of coming to the page. And also because there was racial reckoning going on. So a lot of people were also looking for ways to connect with things about Black culture, to learn more, to educate themselves. And I found a lot of people that were coming to the page and finding it that way. So it was really awesome to kind of start it that way. These photos that are here, these are the first books that were a part of the collection that came from my personal collection that I was just like, okay, I'm just gonna, these are the books that are gonna start the collection out. One of the books, it's at the bottom, it's the Rag Mud collection. So that was something that I received during my time interning and as a fellow at the Toledo Museum of Art. So I was able to acquire that. The rest of the books I had gotten from friends and as gifts because one year I told my friends, I was like, I'd like art books for my birthday. So I had a wish list of like art books that I wanted to have because art books are pretty pricey. So I was like, well, this could be a good thing to put on a birthday wish list. So that's when I got some of these books and really started the collection. The orange book was actually the first book I purchased for Black Art Library's collection, and it's from the retrospective on Buford Delaney at the Studio Museum in 1978, I believe. And I was super excited when I found it, and this really like ignited like my, I feel like passion for this. So I found it, I got it for $50 or so. And in my mind, I was like, that's a great deal. This book is from 1978 and it was in amazing condition when I got it. And I just found it online on a used like bookseller. I was like, oh, like I can find these things. So after that, I was just trying to find more and more and what I could find. And the project just continued to grow until I had my first pop-up in the summer of 2020. So this is a photo from the first pop-up that I ever did for Black Art Library. I connected with an artist from Detroit. His name is Tony Rave. And he was like, hey, like I have this house that I want to eventually use for some kind of resource for artists, some kind of space that artists could use. But he was like, it's not fully renovated yet, and it's pretty much it's empty. But I think it could be really cool if you brought the books here and did like a pop-up. And I hadn't thought of doing any kind of pop-up. That was not in my mind at all. So that's really where this idea came in. So I was like, okay, what do I need to do to like have a pop-up? I was like, I need furniture. So I went on to Facebook Marketplace. That's where I bought that table, which is a beautiful large wooden table. And I bought two of them for I think like $150. Those two bookshelves in the back that are on wheels. I found those on Facebook Marketplace, spray painted them black. And the pews that are in the back, he actually already had those pews in the home. So we kind of moved those around and I brought a few like little stools and I brought a rug and I wanted it to feel kind of comfortable and like, you know, like a home, not like a foreign type of space. I wanted people to come in and be comfortable. I also encouraged people to bring chairs and blankets because right outside of that window in the photo was a really, really nice backyard. So back there we had another table set up with a really gigantic puzzle of it was an Alma Thomas like puzzle. So and it was like 500 pieces. I don't think it got finished, but I set that up there. And people were encouraged to like pick out a few books. You can go sit down in the back and spend some time reading. It was 2 days and it was amazing. People came, which is always the biggest thing that you're concerned about. People did come, but also it wasn't just people that I knew. It was people that I had never met before. People traveled to come. And I was just so excited to be able to talk to people and kind of hear more about kind of how they found out about the project. And it really just was amazing. And this opportunity led to the next kind of opportunity, and kind of that's really how it's been. After the first pop-up, I was offered the opportunity to exhibit Black Art Library at the Museum of Contemporary Art Detroit. I had never like fathomed the idea of it being in a museum, being in a gallery, any type of art space like that. I had never thought about it. But when they were like, would you like a chance to do this? I was like, yeah. So they had complete kind of control over what they wanted to create. So they actually built those shelves onto the wall. At this time, I only had about maybe 300 or so books in the collection. So these were all of the books. So there were shelves on 2 walls. And then they also ended up finding like some old library cards and put like a vinyl decal on there for me. And they actually let me keep those afterwards. But it was really amazing to kind of see this in this kind of space, in this setting. You can see one table right here. There were actually 2 tables with 2 chairs each. This was in 2021. So social distancing was in full effect. They didn't want to have too many tables, too many chairs. They wanted to kind of limit the amount of of space allowed for sitting, just so people could spend time and then possibly move on. They could sanitize and kind of go about it. They actually had a system where after people looked at the books, they would put them on the cart to kind of let them dissipate of any germs, because we didn't really know what the germs were doing. We didn't know if they would stay on the books. No one really knew what was going on. So they were just being cautious. And it was really exciting to kind of see this happen and just to see the process. So that opportunity at the Museum of Contemporary Art directly led to the opportunity at Spaces Gallery, which is in Cleveland. And it's very interesting because it's on Detroit Street in Cleveland. That was just really cool to me when I was there, because I was like, there was still a Detroit connection when I got there. But this was different because the books were actually in conversation with an artist. And that was the first time that that was happening. So Davon Brantley was the artist who was included in this exhibition. You can see one of his large works in the photo up on the slide. And this actually was done directly onto the wall. So they actually just left that white space and he came in and he was able to kind of do it directly on the wall, which I thought was super, super cool. And I loved seeing the books kind of right next to his work, especially because he was like, yes, some of these artists are, ones that I'm inspired by. And these are artists that I kind of look to sometimes to get more inspiration for my work. So I thought it just made perfect sense. The exhibition was called Art History, and I love that. So it was just a really amazing opportunity to see it in, these 2 different art spaces at this time. I actually think this also was in 2021, but it could have been in 2022. Time has been weird, so I can't really remember when things are, but I think it might have been in 2021, that fall. So from this, the library has had the opportunity to kind of grow and continue to travel. So since this exhibition in Cleveland, it has gone to, and this won't be in any particular, it's not going to be in the order that it has gone to. It might actually be easier for me to go backwards. So before the books were at MoCA Westport, I had a pop-up in DC. I've done pop-ups in Charlotte. I've done pop-up in Chicago. I had longer installations in Houston and San Antonio, and a few in Detroit. I've had a few different kind of installations in different spaces, not just art spaces, because it's not only art spaces. I actually like the idea of having, small pop-ups in places that aren't art related, because I'm not only seeking out people that are interested in art, I'm trying to find people that might not have realized they're interested in art yet, or might just, find this information interesting. So it's just been a really interesting ride, and it hasn't been necessarily what I was expecting, because I don't think I had any expectations when I really started this project. I've just been going along for the ride and kind of just letting everything happen as organically as possible. That's kind of how I am as a person in general, and it's been really great. I'm like, at some point, the formula is probably going to have to change, and I'm going to have to start doing things in a different way. But I was like, I will just kind of ride this wave of how things have been going until I get to a point where that isn't working anymore. So it's just been really, really great.
Thank you so much, Asmaa, for
Thank you.
sharing the journey so far with Black Art Library, and also giving us that kind of moment by moment component of working in and through the pandemic, which was something that all of us in the art world had to adapt to, kind of the switch to a QR code for so many things on gallery walls. And also, I think in speaking with so many of the artists that are included in it will go on, it is this moment of simultaneous pandemic, racial reckoning, an upcoming election that was really at that time when you were starting Black Art Library. And like, definitely I can see in the work of Vanessa Charlot and Demian Diniache as well, and Susan Chen, the real uncertainty of that moment, but also an auspicious desire for change, and for a change in narrative in how we talk about collective histories. And it's Black Art Library is definitely part of that. And so I wanted to ask you about what your process in selecting the books for each installation. How do you go about looking through your collection, and which books speak to different parts of the country or the different themes of the exhibitions that you are collaborating with?
So I'll talk about this in two different ways, because it's kind of a two-parter for me. So generally when I'm approached about doing an installation, I kind of leave it open to the institution to decide what books they'll want. So I'll provide what books I have, what books on, certain artists that they might be interested in. I can kind of guide them to kind of what I have, and just to think more openly about like different ideas or different kind of thoughts they're having. But I like to leave it completely open, because I feel like they know their institution better than me. They know their audiences better than me. So, and they know whatever shows they're preparing for it. They know those better than I do. So I share with them, like, this is what I have. These are I'll share maybe different installations that have happened, maybe what different places we're interested in looking at or having a part of their installation. And then we'll kind of go from there. But I do kind of want to talk about my process in just collecting in general and deciding what I'm going to collect. Because I think originally when I started, I think I kind of started with looking at, okay, what are some foundational like texts and some very key exhibitions in Black art across the diaspora that I know I need to have my hands on for this collection. But as time went on, I started to get super excited about finding things that are older. So I actually, in my mind, I like to think of it as, okay, I need to find everything that is older first, and then I will prioritize the things that are coming out now. So it's usually not super high on my priority to get, okay, books, okay, these books are coming out in 2024. I have to have them in 2024. I'm more concerned with books that I can find from like 1975 because I feel like I won't be able to find those forever. I feel like the new books will be there. I feel like I'll be able to track those down a lot easier. So I'm trying to work, I guess, backwards as far as, okay, what's the earliest kind of books or information I can find and collect? And then I'll kind of go from there. So even now, I think a lot more of my interest is in, I think it's just in, I just get really excited. It's, to me it's like, I'm like, oh, this is super nerdy. But I just get really excited having something in my hands that is like super old, that's like way before my time. Like, it's something exciting about that. So I prioritize trying to find those publications. Even more so recently, I've been doing more work on that end because a lot of those books are technically in Black Art Library's special collection. So special collections are normally more rare. Most of them are usually reference collections. So these are kind of where all of those older publications, kind of out of print, things that I know I can't find again, that's technically where those live. And I think recently I've kind of been prioritizing that collection just because I've gained a real interest in archives and archiving. That has been really what's drawing my interest, but so much that goes into it because it really just depends. Someday I might see like, oh, that book just came out, oh, I need to get that one, because I actually did just buy a few books that came out in 2024, just because I saw them and I was like, these aren't gonna be around long. So that's a different thing too. Like, if I know it's gonna be gone, I know I need to have it. Things that I know, like, okay, they'll probably do another print of that, or I feel like I'll be able to find a used copy of that pretty easily, I'll like put on the back burner. I'm like, it'll come eventually.
Yeah, thank you so much for those insights, and to see those different sections of the collection already growing, the special collections, kind of these books that are coming in with waves of exhibitions that are happening. But also, particularly at MoCA Westport, I know when we were collaborating around books that would be in MoCA Westport's iteration of Black Art Library, there was emphasis on artists that were, and our historians that were working in Connecticut, to think about that local community. Like I'm from Connecticut, and so that was really important to me. And then another element as well was kids' books. And so there's a kids' corner in the exhibition. Can you talk about the process of collecting Black Art Library's kids collection?
Yeah, so the children's collection is actually a little different in how I collect it. So in the children's collection, there are books that are on Black artists, and then there are books that are illustrated by Black artists. So that's kind of the distinction. And it's not that same distinction in the rest of the collection per se. Well, it kind of is, but it's different. So with the children's books, I just love the idea of, the artists who illustrate them, like having, that's their art in that form. So it might not even be a book about art. I have books on like a bunny or something. It's like a board book, like for babies, but it was illustrated by Kadir Nelson. So that's why it's in the collection. But if you see it like out of that context, you wouldn't really, you're like, well, what is this book? It's called something the bunny, like it's just about a little bunny. And but you're like, okay, well, how is this related to Black art, or what is this? And it's because the artist who illustrated is a Black artist. So sometimes I do kind of have to kind of explain that. And some I get a lot of questions about like, how do you decide what you collect and how do you kind of maneuver through that? And I try to just be as specific as possible about what the books in the collection are, because I also get donations sometimes that don't technically fit into the collection, sometimes I can like in my mind like make a case for like having it in the collection. And it's really, there's no one to tell me like, no, that book can't be in the collection. There's no one doing that. But in my mind, I like to kind of keep it straight kind of in that way.
Yeah, I imagine there's like so many amazing books in general that you would just want to be able to have access to, but also having a vision around thinking through a Black archival practice. And so I wanted to ask you how you saw yourself in relationship to a really long history of Black librarians and Black curators who have taken some of, say, a pamphlet or a book that hasn't been seen as valuable for so much time, and asserting its value, asserting its presence through the process of um, making it a library collected item, of making it a special collected item, and thinking about that kind of history, particularly in the United States, around doing that, and how you see this Black Art Library, a pop-up, or also a virtual iteration as well in that longer history.
When I first started doing this, I don't think I had a real understanding of everything that library work entails, which is even why like I kind of lean away from calling myself a librarian, but then even librarians that I meet, they're like, no, like you're doing the work, so you are qualified enough. But I'm like, I don't have a master's in library science, so technically like no, but I am doing that work. And I think coming from like it really like just comes from a genuine interest and like love. And I think that that is really what pushes everything that I do, because I love what I'm doing with this, and I love learning new things. I love finding new things, and being able, like you said, to take those things that might not have had much value, or someone, you know, might not have thought to keep, and bringing them into the collection. Even like thinking about that, I actually just, so one of the books that was featured in the first kind of books that I bought for the collection, it was, I think the show is Blackmail, and it was, I think, Thelma Golden's first curated show at the Whitney. And if not the first one, it was one of her early shows that she curated at the Whitney. The other day, so I spend a lot of time on eBay. That is where all of the gems and things are that you find. I actually found an original brochure from that exhibition. That exhibition opened 1994. So I found a brochure for it and I bought it, but I was like, wow, it's like somebody's been holding on to this like brochure for 30 years. But then it makes me think about what value did they think it had and what kind of value it has to me. And thinking about that, so they had it, the price was, it was $30. For me, I feel like that's pretty low, because I know what the item is and I know how important it is and I know it's important to me. But in my mind, I'm like, I also feel like the person who was selling it realized it had some level of importance, because I don't think, you know, brochures, those are things you get for free. Those are things, if you go to the exhibition, you get it. You don't intend on selling things like that. So I know the person who had it knew that there was some value to this item. And it's really interesting, because sometimes I'll find things like that, like, oh, someone's selling it for like $10 and I can make an offer for like $5, and then they'll give it to me. And those are usually, they don't realize what they have. But it's really interesting when I'm able to find things and I'm like, someone did see the value in this item. It wasn't just me that saw the value in it. And I really kind of love that. And I think that's what makes searching for items exciting too.
Yeah, just thinking on those initial books that you showed at the start of your presentation, that is an incredible spread to even start with. Like, to already have Black male in your collection at the start. And I know, like, right now I'm a PhD student and I have to view that book in special collections. because it is such a precious book. People do not lend their copies of that book.
I also
And
you need to be on the lookout because I found a copy on eBay. It was an ex-library copy. It wasn't in great condition, but it was 28 bucks and I bought it.
oh,
So you have to keep your eyes peeled. So I will, now that I know that, it'll be in the back of my mind. So next time I see a cheap copy, I'm going to send it to you.
thank
You're
you.
welcome.
Yeah, and I was just thinking of, like you're saying, how there are people who are kind of participating in that archival practice, or maybe it's a family member that saved that scrap or that clipping, and you're now rediscovering that and seeing it for what it is. And so I wanted to think through how you're employing a new archival type of work through the use of social media. It's interesting when you think about books, right? They're solid objects. They last for future generations, but also something like social media seems somewhat ephemeral, but it's been so foundational in growing the archive and raising awareness to what this incredible project you're working on. So I wonder if you could talk about how you think about social media in conversation with kind of these brick and mortar like institutions or libraries or collections.
For me, like the Instagram account was all that existed at first. That was the primary way that I could connect with people. I could share kind of what I had. And in my mind, I was like, well, I don't think, I mean, in my mind, I was like, well, I know I probably will need something else, but I was like, I'm kind of okay with just doing this through Instagram right now and seeing where it goes. All the photos, they stay on there until the internet fails one day and then it's gone. But I was like, well, I like kind of building it. Like if you go back on Black Art Library's Instagram page, you can see all of the books that I've posted from the collection. Every book is not posted. And I know that because I have close to 700 books, but I don't have that many posts. So I know not all the books are posted, but really early on, I was posting every book because I was taking pictures of them as I was purchasing them. They weren't really coming in and kind of big in bulk and like getting a lot at once. Now I have like a lot more going on, so I'll get books and it'll take a while for me to take photos of them. So that was the primary way of kind of being able to share the information. But I think this was what years? It's 2024. So I think this was 2023 when this happened, or it could have been mid 2022. But I got locked out of Black Art Library's Instagram account. At that point, I was like, well, it's all gone now. Oh, I couldn't get back into it. Like I was locked out of the account for over a month, and I just had made peace with it being gone. And I was like, okay, well, I have to pivot. I have to figure out how to get these books and these images to people. So I was like, well, I really, really, really got to get the website kind of up and going, because that is going to be the next way I'm going to be able to, have scanned images of the front and backs of the books, have more information on each book. That would really make it a lot more complete and a lot more information. But in my mind, I'm like, I really love the idea of the Instagram account because it allows me to also be in conversation with people. I've built a really awesome community of followers, like people that I've never met, but there are followers on that account that respond to every post, that reach out, that kind of say like, oh, like I just got that book, or oh, like this is something I just got. I have people reaching out to me frequently like, hey, I have these 2 books, would you like these for the library? Like I could send them. Like that is how I'm able to do that work, and it also just makes it a lot more seamless. It's very easy for me to be able to kind of do that because it's just me like working on the project. So I always have my phone in my hand 9 times out of 10. So social media just makes it easier. Like for me, I know that that's temporary and it's not going to be around forever. So I had been thinking, and really after I lost access to the Instagram account for that amount of time, I was thinking of like, okay, what do I need to do now to ensure that the collection would still be available. So one of those things was getting the website up and going. But more so recently, I decided to. So I'm back in school. So I'm getting a graduate certificate in archival administration because I was like, okay, I actually need tools to be able to kind of continue this work, and not the self-taught tools that I've been able to pick up over this amount of time. I need to learn the real foundation to this archival work so I can preserve this collection and make sure that it's able to grow, and make sure that it's around beyond social media, to make sure the books kind of stay intact enough for people to be able to see them, to be able to hold them, maybe to look through them, whatever the case would be. So I've realized that I have to be on both sides of that. Like, I love the idea of the internet being the connecting factor, because it just allows you to connect to so many people in so many different places. Even early on, most of my followers don't live in Detroit. I actually think I have a really high concentration of followers in New York. And because if you look at your analytics, you can get that breakdown. And that was really interesting to see. I'm like, okay, I am connecting to these other places. So I love that aspect of it, but I know that's not forever and it won't last forever. So I'm taking the steps to make sure, okay, when that ends, I can still kind of pivot and be able to still provide access to this information and to these resources that I've like built.
Yeah, I think for me at least, I've always turned to your account to keep a pulse on what books I need to be looking at if I am not aware of them already. And if there's new artists that I need to know. I think social media can be tricky, like you're saying, because it has an ephemeral quality, but also it's such an amazing network. I run an Instagram account as well, Black Art History, and I think it's always incredible how um, you think that people are already doing this work, and which they have been doing in so many different ways, but that there's still so much that people are searching for. So many artists' names, so many people to tag and kind of bring into these questions of community. And something I wanted to ask you about, particularly around the archive and this work that you're doing, is for you, what's the role of thinking through the narratives of Black women and Black women artists and curators in the types of work and the work that you're doing and the books that you're collecting? I think that the role of women in art history is something that's been brought up many times. And when you ask someone to name Black artists that they know, they're often not naming women. And so can you talk to me about that and what the role of Black Art Library is in those forms of visibility?
This year, I had a very interesting realization. So earlier this year, at the installation that I had at the, why am I forgetting the full name of the museum? It's the women's museum that's in DC, National Museum of Women in the Arts. So when they reached out to me about doing an installation, they were like, how many books do you have on, women artists? And then I was like, I don't know. I'm sure. I was like, I'm sure the collection, like half the collection. I don't know. So when I actually looked, it was not that. Majority of the books in the collection were on male artists. But after I was like, well, that wasn't super surprising, because I was like, well, more of the male artists have books and they get books and they have shows and they've had retrospectives, and they've been showcased and they've been highlighted. But a lot of the women artists, that has not happened. They might not have ever had any book like published on their work. And at that point I was like, okay, this isn't good. So I was like, it's like become like, I was like, okay, this year I'm gonna add 100 books on women artists to the collection. I think I'm already at about, what are we? We're in April. I think I started doing this in maybe February. I think I purchased about 40 books. on Black women artists, and more than half of them are women artists who are not already reflected in the collection. And that was really important for me, being able to include artists that I didn't know about, had never heard about, and stories maybe hadn't been included in what we hear about Black women in art. We hear about a lot of the same names a lot of times, but there's so many other women artists that are out there. Recently, I purchased a book, and it's called, and I think I have it posted on the account, but it's called Gumbo Yaya. I can't think of the full title of it, but it is, I actually think it's like Black women in contemporary art, something around there. I was like, okay, one, that was a harder book to find, but I did find a copy of it, and I was like, okay, great. And I posted it on the page, and I had someone reach out to me. I think they like DM'd me, and she was like, hey, like, I'm featured in this book. Can I send you like my monograph? And I can't think of what her name right now is. It's leaving me, but she was the first woman to get a BFA at University of Michigan. And I was like, that's amazing. And she is born and raised like in Michigan. So I was like, you see I had no idea. I had never like heard about her work. And even the idea of the social media being able to connect us that way, but just being able to think like, okay, there are so many artists like out here that I don't know. So I really need to do a deep dive into that book. And I actually probably need to find a personal copy for myself. I was like, there's still so many of these like artists that I don't know, but I'm pushing myself to be able to kind of find and uncover some of these artists, to be able to find some of these books, to be able to find more, because I need the collection to be I need the collection at least be equal. Like, I don't know if it will be ever, but I need it to be somewhere close to that. And I want to make sure that I'm including the Black women artists that, back then, that are working now, and also being able to just really learn for myself. So that's one thing that this project is, that I love it. I'm always learning new things. Like, I don't approach this from like, oh, I know all of this. I have all this like art history information. This was built out of a need to learn more about Black artists. I had been doing some of that, work on my own. I didn't really learn about a lot of Black artists in undergrad. In grad school, I learned about a lot more than I did in undergrad, but I still was, afterwards I was still like, okay, I have to do my Googles. Okay, who's this? How do I find this out? And I really wanted to take the guesswork out for other people who are also interested in finding out that information. So really, I feel like this project is just a big learning experience for me, learning how to do this work, but learning from these books as I'm doing the work.
Yeah, I think it's always kind of amazing to think through how like history has kind of shifted, even what we have today, like around books, like you're saying, like if you have more retrospectives, then you're going to have more books. And so I think that speaks to kind of this ecosystem of curators and librarians and collectors, and how these roles really are interdependent in helping to tell the story of a more inclusive Black art history, or a more inclusive art history. And like someone I've been thinking a lot about recently is Augusta Savage and her role as an artist, and that she didn't have very many retrospectives, even though she was one of the most important figures in the Harlem Renaissance, and trained artists like Norman Lewis, trained artists like Jacob Lawrence. And they speak to her mentorship as central to the opportunities they had in the art world, as some of the most well-known Black artists, contemporary artists that we have today. And so I think we have to really remember the role of Black women in helping to usher in so much of the conversation around arts and culture. And she founded her own gallery as well.
And
Oh, go ahead.
no, I was gonna say I actually just
Mm.
found out about I can't think of her name right now either. I'm thinking about it, but she was a woman sculptor in Detroit, and I think there's I'll send you this Instagram page too, because we have someone here who is highlighting a lot of the Black artists from Detroit that you don't really know about. So I know they had to do some deep diving like on some of this research. And this Black woman sculptor, she actually trained with Augusta Savage. And it's just like there's so many kind of connectors, and like these figures have so many just connections with each other, and but realizing it and being able to highlight that. So like, and I know like that the artist that I'm thinking about, there aren't any books on her. I'm not going to be able to find a book on her. So it's really, I have to like, okay, well, she's kind of involved in the history of Black women sculptors. So being able to at least kind of show that history of Black women in sculpture, that will kind of be able to kind of share her story. But there are ways I'm like, okay, well, if there isn't anything on these artists, like, how do I still share?
Yeah, and I think that speaks to the idea that so many artists were mobile. And I think that's something that we forget, that say Duncanson was traveling throughout the world, right? Like Tanner was traveling throughout the world. So it wasn't a process of just staying in one city or one locale. And I think that's often how these narratives are told. Like the Harlem Renaissance happened in Harlem, but really it was a much larger movement. So thank you for all these productive thoughts that you've brought forward, Asmaa, when thinking about Black Art Library. And I'm just so pleased to have it as a part of the exhibition of It Will Go On, which will be up through June 16th. So when you come to the museum, if you get a chance, definitely do stop by and take a look at some of the books that are in the installation. I wanted to transition to the Q&A component of today's talk. So Asmaa, I'll just read off the first question, which is for you. Would you consider publishing a book speaking on your journey towards creating this growing collection for young minds who might be interested in following a similar path?
I actually would love doing something like that. Like, it's not, I'm like, I don't know how, but I was like, if the stars aligned in the right way, someone's like, hey, like, we want to do this book, and they could like help me with all the steps to doing it, I definitely would, because I do feel like I want to be able to share kind of like what I'm doing. I love being able to, especially share what I'm doing with like young people, especially because so much of their world relates to social media and kind of the internet and like everything. And I like to be able to, well, the internet kind of allowed me to be able to create this resource, but not just that, I did have to do other things. So I would like to kind of be able to share that story eventually. I feel like I'll get to a point one day.
Definitely. There'll be a time. I can't wait to read that book. The next question I have is for you as well. Self-publishing has allowed anyone who wants to be an author to do so. Do you include self-published books? And if so, what's your criteria for making the cut?
I will have any book in the collection as long as it is related to Black visual art and visual art specifically, because I do get, like, sometimes I do get people that are doing, like, I actually think I had someone reach out to me recently about, it's a super, super, super cool book. It's kind of like a glossary, like a dictionary of natural hair, and it's super, super cool. And I've been trying to like wrap my mind around like, okay, if I could include it, but I don't think it technically like kind of fits into that realm. But I will try to, like, if I can work with it to try to make it fit, I will. I don't collect books that are related to music unless they have a connection to the visual arts, because I know I'd have so many books if I also included Black performing arts. That opens up a whole nother area of books that could be included. So really, as long as it is related to Black visual art in some way, if it has illustrations by a Black artist, that's pretty much my criteria.
And I think we kind of talked about that too, as well as the fact that you're, as the head, you get to make some of those decisions. Whereas I think in other settings, there's a lot more that is kind of in place around what gets to be seen as like additive for for a library's collection. So I think that's also a really beautiful component of Black Art Library. I saw a question here, Asmaa, to both of us, just thinking about the connection between art and literature and how the two kind of work together in creating space for Black futurities. And I think for me, it's always been apparent that the two are connected. And that's why I have always that's why I thought about this exhibition in this way, and talking with so many artists that are included in the show. Much of the work begins with the literary. For example, Remy Sosa, whose work is in the show, begins every work with a poem. Often Glenn Ligon, an artist that's in the show, is thinking around Black literature, Black writers, and that's often where the text comes from. That is the iconic component of his pieces. And so to me, I think that's kind of a part of the Black radical tradition. That's part of Black studies, is to think across the literary, the sonic, the visual in a way that may not make sense to everyone as a way of working, but as so necessary and critical to how creativity flourishes. So I think, to me, I will continue to kind of work across those lines, because I think it's the only way to really capture the narratives and the stories I want to tell.
I definitely know the connection is there. One thing about Black Art Library is that I don't collect poetry. That's another thing. I get a lot of kind of inquiries about like books that might be more about poetry. I'm sure there probably are some books that are in the collection that are more about poetry, but they might have illustrations in them. So that's why the connection is, it can't be denied. So I have another project that I kind of do. It's just for funds. And it is called Used and Rare. And it is basically just my personal collection of things that I really like that I also occasionally will sell from. So like this past fall, like I was set up at the Detroit Art Book Fair to sell things from the collection. So I collect things kind of throughout the year, and then I get a point where I'm like, okay, I can sell some of these things now. A lot of the collection it's literature heavy, it's poetry heavy. It's actually still looking at it right now. I just like bought this book. It is a signed Gwendolyn Brooks book. So these are the things that I collect in Using Rare. So things like this. I have a lot of poetry books. That's kind of also where I house my collection of Broadside Press, which was a Black publisher in Detroit that published mostly poetry through the, 60s, really through the 60s through the 90s. They're still around now, but it's kind of a different iteration. But, they were publishing Gwendolyn Brooks, Sonia Sanchez, all of the kind of heavy hitters kind of in that realm. And I have a great appreciation for all of those items that I kind of collect. I do keep them separate from Black Art Library because everything isn't visual heavy. I have different things in the collection. I have like dolls. I have a lot of different things, but this is where I'm able to kind of lean into lean into literature, lean into that area of Black art that I don't really get into with Black Art Library, but the connection is so strong. And even sometimes I buy things, I'm like, okay, can I put this in the library? I like go back and forth because it's like there is a way to kind of weave everything together because it really is connected. So for me, yeah, like the love and the appreciation for all of the things are there, but I do kind of just keep it separate for Black Art Library for that reason. But in other avenues, I do kind of embrace it and kind of embrace everything that Black art is, and that also includes the literature aspect of it.
Wow, yeah, I definitely can't wait to see what you do with these items like Gwendolyn Brooks's signed copies. Could you share with us, Asmaa, what's next for Black Art Library?
Well, I will share it here because I also feel like why not share it here? So one thing for Black Art Library that always was something I was interested in, but I wasn't I was like, it'll happen when it happens, was a physical location, a permanent physical location. So right now, things travel, they stay up temporarily, they're in different spaces. A lot of the times, half of the books are in storage and or taking up a lot of space in my living room. The books are really everywhere. They haven't really been in one place together. But the stars have aligned to where I'm in the works. I'm working on Black Art Library's permanent location, and more information on that will be I'll be able to share like this year, but the permanent location is coming, which is something I've been super excited about. It will be like what it is now, a reference library, but eventually, possibly, not even going to say definitely, I would love to figure out solutions for lending books. Only certain books obviously would be kind of included on books that could be loaned out, but having a permanent space will make that easier because I have no permanent space. I'm always moving. If I'm lending books out, there's no place to necessarily come back to bring the books back to. There's no designated area. So I was like, no, that's not really something I can do or even explore, but now I might have that opportunity. So that's what's next. So there will be more on that soon. So definitely follow along with Black Art Library's Instagram account because that is the first place that most information gets out, but also the website. I believe the website will be coming this year. It's in the works right now, so I'm super excited about that. I've been in the process of scanning all the covers of the books because that is something I'm gonna have to do for the website. So have to scan maybe about 500 more covers of books front and back. But once we have all of that and my web designer can do his magic, the website will be here, and hopefully it is just as great as a resource as I feel like the Instagram account can be.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing everything you're working on. I can't wait to visit the physical location at some point. And it's just been so wonderful to have you here in conversation through this virtual series with MoCA Westport. Ruth, did you have anything you want to say to help close out?
Thank you both so much. Asmaa, we just want to support you and this endeavor. It's been such a great collaboration. Victoria, thank you so much for this whole exhibition. It's really a treat. I mean, it's really an honor to have this show at MoCA and to have this kids go in there every day and are like looking through the books. So it's really been special. So thank you so much. And we just want to keep supporting you, Asmaa. This has been amazing. And Victoria, thank you so much for your work as well.
Thank you guys. Thank you, Victoria, for including me.
Thank you, everyone, just for supporting the project. And just, again, follow Asmaa at Black Art Library. And just thank you for coming tonight. Bye.